She's pregnant, and there's no husband." The whisper hit the schoolhouse steps like a slap across the face. Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway, chalk still in her hand, 30 pairs of children's eyes watching their teacher's world collapse in real time. She hadn't done anything wrong. But in Willow Creek Valley, in the autumn of 1878, the truth didn't matter nearly as much as the story people chose to believe. If you've ever been judged before, you could speak. This story is for you. Subscribe to our channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The chalk hit the floor before Clara realized her fingers had gone numb. She had arrived at the schoolhouse at her usual hour, 20 minutes before the bell, early enough to write the morning lesson on the board and arrange the reader books in the order she always kept them. She liked those quiet minutes before the children arrived. They were the only time the day felt fully hers. The fire in the potbelly stove, the smell of wood smoke and old paper, the sound of her own footsteps on the plank floor. Simple things, steady things. She had no reason to expect that morning to be any different from the 100 mornings that came before it. But when she pushed open the door, she heard voices inside. Not children's voices. Women's. 3 of them standing near the back row of desks with their heads bent close together, speaking in the hushed, urgent way that women in Willow Creek spoke when the news was too good or too damaging to say out loud. Clara recognized 2 of them immediately. Dorothea Mills, the wife of the land commissioner, and Ruth Hennessy, whose husband ran the general store and whose ears were the most reliable broadcasting system in the entire valley. The third woman had her back turned. Clara cleared her throat. All 3 of them turned at the same moment. And something passed over their faces, not guilt exactly, not embarrassment. It was something closer to hunger. The particular expression of people who have been waiting for the moment they get to watch a story unfold. "Miss Whitmore," Dorothea said. Her voice was perfectly pleasant. That was the most frightening part. We came to speak with you." About what? Clara set her satchel on the desk. "School doesn't begin for another 20 minutes. "It's not about school, dear." The third woman turned around. Abigail Carter. Clara kept her expression still. That was something she had learned years ago in a house with a father who drank and a mother who didn't. You learned very early that letting your face react was the same as handing people a weapon. So she kept her face still, and she looked at Abigail Carter the same way she would look at a problem written wrong on the chalkboard. Calmly, carefully, without letting on that she already knew it was wrong. "Mrs. Carter," Clara said, "I wasn't expecting you." "No," Abigail said. "I don't imagine you were." Abigail Carter was 51 years old, with iron gray hair pulled so tight against her skull it looked painful, and the kind of permanent, downward-set mouth that suggested she had made a decision somewhere around her 30th year to stop pretending to enjoy things she didn't enjoy. She was the wife of Gerald Carter, who owned the largest dry goods operation in the valley, and sat on the town council and had a habit of reminding people of both those facts whenever he could. They had one son, Douglas, 27 years old, soft-handed, and accustomed to receiving whatever he asked for. Clara had rejected Douglas Carter 11 months ago. She had done it quietly, privately, and with as much kindness as she could manage, because she understood that men like Douglas, men who had never been told no, didn't hear the word the first time. She had told him she was not interested in marriage, that she valued her work, that she hoped he would find someone suited to him. He had not taken it well. He had told her she would regret it. Clara had assumed that was the end of it. She was wrong. "We've been hearing some troubling things," Dorothea said, stepping forward slightly, as though she had rehearsed this positioning. "About you, Miss Whitmore. About your condition." Clara looked at her. "My condition?" "The children," Ruth Hennessy said. The gentleness in her voice was almost worse than cruelty would have been. "We have to think about the children. I teach the children," Clara said. "I think about them every day. More than most people in this room, I suspect." "Miss Whitmore." Abigail's voice cut through the other two like a blade through cloth. "There is a rumor spreading through this town. A serious one. And before it goes any further, I think you ought to address it. What rumor, Mrs. Carter? Abigail's chin lifted. That you are with child. The room went very quiet. Clara heard the fire crackling in the stove. She heard a horse somewhere outside on the street. She heard her own breathing steady and deliberate because she forced it to be. That, she said carefully, is not true. People are saying, I don't care what people are saying. She heard the edge in her own voice and softened it not because she was afraid, but because she refused to give Abigail Carter the satisfaction of watching her lose control. What people are saying is false. I am not with child. I have never been with child. I am an unmarried woman who teaches school and lives alone and has done nothing to earn that kind of gossip. Dorothea and Ruth exchanged a look. That look told Clara everything. The story was already out. Whatever she said in this room, whatever she denied or explained or defended it, didn't matter. The story was already in the street. It had already moved from mouth to mouth, the way fire moved through dry grass fast and hungry, and completely indifferent to what it destroyed. I think, Abigail said slowly, that it would be best for everyone if you were to take a leave of absence from the school, just until the matter is resolved. The matter? Clara repeated. The rumors, Dorothea clarified with a small, sad smile that Clara wanted to scrub off her face. For the sake of the parents, for the children. I am innocent, Clara said, each word separate and hard as a stone. I have done nothing wrong. Of course, Ruth said quickly. Of course, dear, no one is saying you're well. She trailed off, which said everything her words refused to. Clara looked at the three of them. She looked at Abigail Carter last and longest, and she understood with a cold and clarifying certainty that this had nothing to do with the children, nothing to do with morality or the school or the town's sense of propriety. This was Douglas Carter's revenge, delivered through his mother's mouth, dressed up as concern. I'll speak to the school board, Clara said. That won't be necessary, Abigail said. Gerald has already spoken with them. Clara went still. Gerald Carter, the man who sat on the school board committee, who controlled the budget that paid her salary, who had spent 20 years learning which levers to pull in Willow Creek Valley and pulling them without anyone ever seeing his hands move. He's already spoken with them, Clara repeated. They agree that it's best. Abigail picked up her gloves from the desk where she'd set them, an action so deliberate, so unhurried, that it felt like a demonstration. I have already won this. I'm simply letting you watch. You may collect your things. We'll find someone to take the class for the remainder of the week. Clara didn't move for a long moment. She was calculating. Not the odds, those were already gone. She was calculating what she had left. What was still hers? What couldn't be taken by Gerald Carter's conversations, or Abigail Carter's careful performance, or Ruth Hennessy's pitying eyes? She had her name. She had the truth. She had her dignity, if she could manage to keep it in the next 30 seconds. Clara picked up her satchel. She did not hurry. She did not cry. She walked to the board and erased what she had written slowly, completely, as though she was simply finishing a task she had started. She straightened the reader books. She tucked her chalk into the drawer the way she always did. Then she walked out of her schoolhouse without looking back at any of them. The town knew. That was the first thing she understood when she stepped onto the main street. She could see it immediately in the way people moved, the slight, almost imperceptible shift in posture when they saw her, the way eyes slid away, the way conversation stopped a half-second too soon. She had lived in Willow Creek Valley for 4 years. She knew virtually everyone on this street. She had taught their children, attended their church services, helped with their harvest suppers. She had been, without ever calling it that, a trusted part of this community. Now they were looking at her the way people look at something that has gone bad. Not with hatred. Something worse than hatred. With the careful, discomfited distance of people who have already decided they don't want to get too close. Mrs. Paulson, who had brought Clara a pie on her birthday last spring, turned and found something urgent to examine in the window of the millinery shop. Tom Greer, whose son had struggled with reading until Clara spent 3 extra weeks working with him, nodded once in her direction and kept walking. Emma Hayes, who was Clara's age, and had been, she thought her friend Emma, looked up from across the street, met her eyes, and then looked down. That one hurt the worst. Clara kept walking. She had a room at Marion Gibbs's boarding house 3 blocks east of the school. She focused on that. 3 blocks. She could manage 3 blocks. She was 1 block in when she heard the voice. Loud. Unashamed. Coming from the mouth of Elsa Pruitt, who stood outside the bakery with 2 other women and apparently felt no need to lower her volume. No one knows who the man is, that's the thing. She won't say. Probably doesn't know herself, if you take my meaning. Clara stopped walking. Every sensible part of her said, keep moving. Don't engage. Don't give them a scene. Don't hand them more material. But there was another part of her, the part that had grown up fighting for every small piece of ground she'd ever stood on that refused to let it pass. She turned. Elsa. The women went quiet. Elsa Pruitt had the grace at least to look momentarily startled. I can hear you, Clara said. Her voice was level, controlled. I'm standing right here. If you have something to say to me, say it to my face. Elsa's chin went up. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. What everyone's thinking, Clara repeated. And what is everyone thinking, Elsa? Tell me. Say the words. A small crowd had begun to form. That was the nature of a main street in a small town. People materialized for conflict, the way they materialized for church reliably, completely, without needing to be invited. Elsa Pruitt said nothing. I'll say it for you then, Clara said loud enough for the crowd now. Someone has spread a rumor that I am with child. That rumor is a lie. I am not carrying anyone's child. I have done nothing wrong. And the person who started that story did so because she wanted to destroy something I worked 4 years to build, because her son couldn't accept that I told him no. She could see people exchanging glances, processing, deciding. She could also see that it didn't matter. The mechanics of a rumor were simple and brutal once people believed it. The denial became just another version of the story. The woman who was supposedly pregnant and refused to admit it. The woman who lied, or the woman who was telling the truth, in either case, she remained the woman the town was talking about. There was no exit from that position, not through argument, not through proof, not through anything she could say or do on this street. She had known this somewhere inside herself from the moment she walked out of the schoolhouse. She just hadn't been ready to feel it yet. She was ready now. The weight of it came in all at once, the job she had spent 4 years earning gone in an hour. The friendships, the trust, the painstaking, careful reputation she had built in a town that hadn't had to take her in, and hadn't had to trust her, and had done both, and now Clara kept her face still. She turned away from Elsa Pruitt and the gathered crowd, and found that the crowd had grown larger than she realized. She was standing in the center of the main street now with people on both sides, and the weight of all those eyes was something physical, something that pressed. That's right, walk away, someone said from the crowd. She didn't know who. She didn't look. She can't even deny it properly. Came here from nowhere, nobody knew her people. The poor children having to... Clara stopped walking. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was giving up. She stopped because she realized all at once that she had nowhere to go. Marion Gibbs ran a respectable boarding house. The kind where reputation mattered, the reputation of the establishment, which meant the reputation of the women who lived in it. Clara had known Marion for 4 years. She liked Marion. She believed Marion liked her. But she already knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a woman who had been poor and powerless before, and knew what that felt like, that by the time she reached the boarding house, Marion would have heard. And Marion, who was a decent woman, and not a cruel one, would nonetheless be thinking about her other boarders. About what people would say. About the decision that a respectable woman running a respectable house would be expected to make. She had no family in the valley. Her nearest relations were a cousin in Nebraska she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. She had no money beyond what the school paid her, and the school had just dismissed her. She had no husband, no property, no legal protection of any kind. She was standing in the middle of the main street of Willow Creek Valley in the autumn of 1878, and the town that had been her home was closing around her like a fist, and there was nothing. No door, no road, no person she could point to and say there, "That is where I go." The crowd had gone oddly quiet. Clara became aware slowly that they were no longer looking at her. They were looking at something behind her. She heard it before she understood what it was. The slow, deliberate sound of a horse walking through a crowd that was parting to make room. Not because anyone was told to move, because something in the weight of those hoofbeats communicated without words that moving was the right decision. She turned around. A man sat on a dark horse at the edge of the street. She registered him in pieces, broad shoulders, a coat worn open despite the cold, the particular stillness of someone who had decided before arriving exactly what he was going to do. She had seen Nathan Cole before. Everyone in the valley had seen Nathan Cole. He rode into town perhaps twice a month, conducted whatever business brought him, and left. He did not attend socials. He did not participate in town politics beyond what his taxes and land required. He was in the way that very wealthy and very solitary men sometimes were simultaneously everywhere and nowhere present in the valley's economy, absent from its daily life. He was looking at her. Then he looked at the crowd. When he spoke, his voice carried without effort. Not because he raised it, but because he had the kind of voice that a life spent managing large operations and difficult men had shaped into something that naturally filled whatever space it occupied. "I've been hearing some talk," Nathan Cole said, "about Miss Whitmore." Silence. Not the restless, whispering silence that had surrounded Clara for the past hour. A different kind. The kind that happened when the room or the street understood that something was about to shift. "I want to know," Nathan said, "who started it." No one answered. He let the silence sit. He didn't seem uncomfortable in it. He seemed, if anything, to find it useful. Then he looked at Clara. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was the same, not softer exactly, but different. Not performing now, just speaking to her. "I apologize for the delay." She stared at him. "I beg your pardon. I should have come sooner." He said it simply as though it was factually true, and he was merely acknowledging a factual error in judgment. "I wasn't aware this had reached this point." Clara's mind was working fast, trying to understand what was happening, what he meant, why Nathan Cole was looking at her with the measured expression of a man who had made a decision. Then he turned back to the crowd. "If Miss Whitmore is carrying a child," Nathan Cole said, "then it is mine." The silence that followed was of a kind Clara had never experienced before. It was not the silence of a room absorbing bad news. It was the silence of an entire street trying to recalibrate everything it thought it understood. Nathan Cole, who never attended church socials, who kept his ranch and his distance, who had not, as far as anyone in Willow Creek knew, shown particular interest in any woman in the 4 years since his wife had died. That Nathan Cole was now claiming publicly in the middle of Main Street that he and Clara had Elsa Pruitt made a sound that was not quite a word. Someone else said, "Lord?" Clara looked up at Nathan Cole on his horse and said in a voice low enough that only he could hear, "What are you doing?" He looked down at her. "What needed to be done?" he said. It took 20 minutes for the crowd to disperse. Not because people wanted to leave. They wanted desperately to stay to watch, to hear more, to collect as much of this extraordinary development as they possibly could. But Nathan Cole had a talent for communicating without saying so directly that a situation was over and the remaining audience was now simply trespassing. People felt it and moved. Clara was left standing on the street with a man she had exchanged perhaps 40 words with in 4 years, who had just publicly staked his reputation, which was considerable, on a lie designed to protect hers. "You need to tell me what you think you just did," she said. "I think I gave the town something bigger to talk about," Nathan said. He had dismounted. He stood with his horse's reins in his left hand, and he was looking at her with an expression that was difficult to read, not blank exactly, but carefully contained. When a rumor has no name attached to it, it grows. Give it a name, a specific one, and it becomes a different kind of story, one people can manage. They'll think I know what they'll think, and you're comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with you still having a life in this valley, he said, which is what you won't have if we leave this the way it was 10 minutes ago. Clara looked at him. You don't know me, she said. Something moved across his face. Not hurt exactly. Something older than hurt. No, he said. I don't. But I know what I watched happen on this street today. And I know what it leads to. He paused. Come to the ranch. We can talk properly. Right now you're standing in the middle of Main Street and people are watching from every window, and nothing useful is going to come from a conversation here. I'm not... She stopped, thought. I don't have anywhere else to go, she admitted. The words cost her something. She could feel what they cost. Marion Gibbs will have heard by now. If she hasn't already made a decision, she's thinking about it. Nathan nodded. Then come. I haven't agreed to anything, Clara said. I'm not coming to your ranch doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything. I know that, he said. I make my own decisions. I know that too, he said. And the way he said it, not placating, not performing patience, simply acknowledging a fact, was the thing that decided her. Clara Whitmore took a breath, straightened her back, and walked to Nathan Cole's horse. She didn't speak for the first mile out of town. Nathan rode and didn't press her. The silence between them was not comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people who had just been through something surprising and were separately working out what it meant. Clara was thinking about the look on Abigail Carter's face when Nathan had spoken. Abigail had been in the crowd. Clara had spotted her near the front because of course Abigail had been there. Abigail had come to watch. She had choreographed this entire morning, and she had come to stand in the front row and watch the performance she had written reach its conclusion. Clara wanted to remember the look on Abigail's face when Nathan Cole claimed the child. It had been for one unguarded moment the look of a woman who had understood that something had gone wrong with a plan she thought was perfect. Clara held on to that. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Go ahead. Why? She paused, choosing the word deliberately, because there were too many versions of that question, and she wanted to make sure she was asking the right one. Not, I understand the mechanics of what you did. I can see why it works in terms of the town. But why would you risk anything for me I haven't given you any reason to? Nathan was quiet for a moment. I had a sister, he said. Younger. Her name was May. Clara waited. She was 22 when a rumor went through the town we lived in before we came here. Wrong town, wrong time. Wrong people with too much leisure to fill with other people's business. It wasn't even a complicated story. Nothing as elaborate as what Carter's wife managed today. Just a simple lie. That May had been seen coming out of a certain man's house at a certain time. He stopped, seemed to be deciding how much to say. She hadn't done anything wrong, he said. The man in question was the doctor. She'd gone to speak with him about our father who was sick. Nothing else. But the story was already out before she could explain, and the town decided what it had already decided, and... He paused. She left. She had to. And where she went to, and what happened to her after... Another pause. Longer. I was 23. I didn't have money or influence or anything that would have let me stop it. I watched it happen, and I couldn't do anything. He said it plainly, like a man reporting a fact. But Clara could hear what was underneath the plainness, something that had calcified around a very old wound. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. Not as a social formula, as a real thing. I'm not telling you that so you'll feel sorry for me, he said. I'm telling you because you asked me why. That's why. Not charity. Not because I think you can't handle yourself. I watched you handle yourself back there, and you did it better than most people I've seen in those situations. He glanced at her. I just had the means to make it stop. And I wasn't going to stand there and watch it again when I had the means to stop it. Clara thought about that for a long moment. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you," he said. "You said we could talk at the ranch." "We can." He looked at the road ahead. "I have a proposition for you. I'd rather say it somewhere we're not in the middle of the road." "All right," Clara said. The ranch appeared ahead of them, and even in the state she was in, even with everything that had just happened pressing down on her like a physical weight, Clara felt something shift in her chest when she saw it. It was vast. Not ostentatiously so, not the kind of wealth that announced itself, but it was the kind of place that communicated through its sheer scale and the evidence of decades of careful work that something solid had been built here, something that intended to last. She had spent most of her adult life in rented rooms and temporary arrangements, always in the slightly provisional position of a woman whose security depended on a salary that could be removed. A landlord who could change their mind. A community whose goodwill was never guaranteed. She had never let herself want something solid, because wanting it and not having it was worse than simply not wanting it. She looked at the Cole ranch. She kept her face still, but something in her chest that had been holding itself very tightly loosened just slightly before she could stop it. They rode through the gate as the autumn sun began its long slide toward the mountains, and Clara Whitmore thought, "Whatever he proposes, whatever this is, I will hear it. And then I will decide for myself." That was the one thing that morning had not taken from her, the right to decide. She intended to keep it. The fire was lit in the main room of the Cole ranch house when they came in from the cold, and Nathan Cole said, "Sit down if you'd like." And Clara Whitmore sat down and looked at the man who had just changed both their lives on a main street in front of the entire town, and waited to hear what he had to say, because whatever came next, she was going to face it the same way she had faced everything else, clear-eyed on her own 2 feet, and ready to fight for every inch of the ground she intended to hold. Nathan Cole did not sit down right away. He stood near the fireplace with his coat still on, and Clara watched him the way she watched difficult students, not with impatience, but with the particular attention of someone trying to understand what was happening underneath the surface of a thing. He was thinking. She could see the machinery of it in the set of his jaw, in the way his eyes moved to the fire and stayed there for a moment too long. She had been in enough difficult rooms, with enough difficult people, to know when someone was deciding how honest to be. "Say it plainly," she told him. "Whatever it is." He looked at her. "All right," he said. "Plain then." He finally took off his coat and laid it over the back of the chair nearest him, but he still didn't sit. "The town believes you're carrying my child. That story is going to move through the valley faster than any correction we could offer. By tomorrow morning, everyone within 30 miles will have heard a version of it. I know that. Which means your situation has 2 possible shapes." He held up one hand. "The first, you leave the valley. Go somewhere no one knows you. Start over." Clara said nothing. She had already run through that calculation on the road here. It had taken her about 4 minutes, and she hadn't liked where it ended. "Or," she said. "Or you stay," Nathan said. "But staying requires a story that holds. Right now the story is that you're unmarried and with child by a man who won't name himself. That's a story this town won't forgive. But a different story." He paused. "A story where the man in question is known and is present and is willing to do right by you, that's a story the town can work with." Clara was very still. "You're talking about marriage." "I'm talking about the appearance of a proper arrangement," Nathan said, "which would protect you legally and socially in ways that nothing else available to you in this territory currently does." She studied him. "Is there a difference between the appearance and the thing itself?" He met her eyes. "In terms of what I'm proposing, yes. I'm not talking about I'm not asking for—" He stopped. "Try it again. You would have your own room, your own money, your own decisions. I'm not interested in acquiring a housekeeper I'm not interested in controlling what you do." "Then what are you interested in?" Clara asked. "Because I'm sitting here trying to understand what you get from this Mr. Cole. You're a wealthy man. You have a ranch that runs itself. You have a reputation that doesn't need me to shore it up. So what is it that makes a man like you walk into the middle of a street fight that isn't his and burn his own credibility on a lie for a woman he barely knows? Something shifted in his expression. Not defensiveness. Closer to the look of someone who had been asked a question they weren't sure they were ready to answer truthfully. I told you about May, he said. You did, and I believe you. But that explains the impulse on the street. It doesn't explain this. She gestured at the room, meaning the house, the ranch, the proposition, all of it. This is more than an impulse. Nathan sat down then. He sat in the chair across from her, and for the first time since the street, he looked like a man who was not completely certain of what he was doing. I've been running this ranch alone for 6 years, he said, since Helen died. She had heard that. The valley talked she knew about Helen Cole, who had died of fever in the winter of 1872, and who Nathan had apparently never stopped mourning, at least not in any visible way. 6 years is a long time to be alone, Clara said. I'm not telling you that I'm not asking for sympathy, he said. I'm telling you because you asked me a direct question, and I'm trying to give you a direct answer. The ranch is successful. The work gets done. There is no practical problem. He looked at his hands for a moment. But there's a difference between a house that functions and a house that has something alive in it. Clara looked at him. You're lonely, she said. He didn't flinch. Yes. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me today, she said, and she meant it. Nathan looked up. I'm not asking you to fix that. I want to be clear about that. I'm not asking you to be someone who fills up my empty house for my sake. What I'm offering you is a legal arrangement that protects you in a territory where an unprotected woman has very few options. A room that's yours. A salary. A salary, Clara repeated. You'd be working, running the household accounts at minimum if you're willing. And I'd like... He hesitated. I've been thinking about building a school. On the property. For the children of the ranch hands. Some of them have 3-4 children with no schooling at all. If you were willing to teach... You want to build a school, Clara said. I want to offer you a reason to stay that isn't just about surviving, he said. I want to offer you something worth staying for. The fire crackled between them. Clara sat with her hands in her lap and thought about a schoolhouse she had walked out of that morning, and the chalk she had set down in a drawer, and the children she had not said goodbye to, because there had been no time, because it had all moved so fast. She thought about the look on Emma Hayes's face. Looking down. She thought about Abigail Carter's careful gloved hands, picking up her gloves from the desk in the schoolhouse, the performance of it, the certainty. This arrangement, Clara said. Who knows it's an arrangement? No one, Nathan said. And it stays that way. Forever. For as long as you want. If you decide after a year or 2 years or whatever it takes that you want to leave, you leave. I'll settle money on you. Enough to go wherever you decide to go and start properly. He said it without melodrama, without the performance of generosity, like a man stating the terms of a contract. I'm not asking you to give up your future. I'm asking you to let me buy you time to figure out what you want your future to be. Clara was quiet for a long time. I'll want to think about it, she said. Of course. And I'll want a few things clarified before I give you an answer. Name them. The salary is real, she said. Not an allowance, not permission. A salary I control that I can save that belongs to me. Agreed. The school gets built. Not promised built. I'm not teaching in a tool shed with 3 books and a piece of broken chalk. Something that was almost a smile crossed his face. Agreed. And if I decide to leave... She stopped. You said you'd settle money on me. I want that in writing. Not because I don't believe you. Because I've spent enough of my life being protected by people's word alone, and I've learned that people's word has a tendency to become inconvenient when circumstances change. Nathan looked at her for a moment. Then he said, You've been let down before. Haven't most people, Clara said. I'll draw up a paper, he said. Whatever terms you want. You can have someone review it. Clara nodded slowly. Then she said, I haven't said yes. I know. I'm going to sleep on it. If you have a room, I'll take it for tonight, and give you my answer in the morning. The room's yours whether you take the arrangement or not, Nathan said. That's not a condition. She looked at him. You're a strange man, Mr. Cole. I've been told, he said. No. She didn't sleep. She lay in the room he'd shown her, a clean, quiet room that smelled of cedar and disuse, the kind of room that had been kept ready for something without knowing what. And she looked at the ceiling and went through it, the way she went through every problem. Methodically, one piece at a time, refusing to let her emotions run ahead of her thinking. She was 24 years old. She had no job, no home, a ruined reputation in the only town within a day's ride, and approximately $11 in the small leather wallet she kept in the bottom of her satchel. She had a cousin in Nebraska. She had not written to that cousin in 3 years, because the last time she'd written, the cousin had written back a letter that made clear politely but unmistakably that Clara's situation was of limited interest to her. She could leave the valley, take the stage east, find work somewhere, maybe a city, somewhere large enough that no one knew her name, and the absence of a reputation was simply anonymity rather than disgrace. She had done it before. She had come to this valley from nothing, built a life from nothing, and she could do it again. But she had been 19 when she'd done it the first time. And she had been angry then with the pure, propulsive anger of someone who has nothing to lose yet, which was almost like optimism if you held it right. She was 24 now, which was not old by any measure, but was old enough to know that starting over a second time was harder than starting over a first time. The body remembered what it had built and mourned it on the way out. She thought about the children she had been teaching. Thomas Reeves, who had a gift for arithmetic that nobody else in his family had noticed yet. Little Pearl Higgins, who had only started reading 2 months ago and was so proud of herself, she brought home her primers every night to show her mother. James Whitfield, whose stutter disappeared completely when he read aloud, which was one of the most remarkable things Clara had ever seen in 4 years of teaching, and which she had never told anyone, because she had the instinct that talking about it might somehow undo it. She thought about a school built on ranch land, where she had actual control, actual salary, actual legal standing. She thought about Nathan Cole's face when he'd said, 6 years is a long time to be alone. He hadn't said it to manipulate her. That was the thing. She was good at detecting manipulation. You had to be when you'd grown up. The way she had when you'd been in the position she'd been in, you developed a precise internal instrument for detecting when someone was performing emotion versus when they were actually feeling it. Nathan Cole was not performing. He was a man who had said a truthful thing and then immediately tried to walk it back because he didn't want her to feel obligated by it. She found that unexpectedly more persuasive than anything else he'd said. The morning came gray and cold. Clara got up, washed her face, straightened her dress, and went to find Nathan Cole. He was already in the main room. He'd made coffee. There was bread on the table, and that small detail. The bread, the coffee, the evidence of someone thinking practically about her needs without being asked, struck her somewhere she wasn't prepared for. She sat down. She poured herself coffee. Yes, she said. Nathan looked at her. I'll take the arrangement, she said. The terms we discussed, and I want the paper drawn up today before the town gets another story going. Nathan nodded once. I'll send for the lawyer this morning. Good. She drank the coffee. It was strong and slightly bitter and very good. And one more thing. Name it. I want it understood between us clearly right now that this arrangement changes if either of us decides we want it to change. Not just if I decide to leave, but if either of us decides anything needs to be different. She looked at him directly. I don't want this to be something we both pretend is one thing when it becomes another thing. I've seen too many people suffer from not saying what's true out loud. Nathan held her gaze. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite name yet, something that was beginning to organize itself around her, the way a man's attention shifts when he realizes that the person he's looking at is considerably more than what he was prepared for. Agreed, he said. And that was how Clara Whitmore and Nathan Cole made a bargain at a kitchen table on a cold October morning, with coffee and plain words and a piece of paper that would be drawn up before noon. Batterson. The lawyer was a man named Aldrich Pratt, who rode out from town at Nathan's request, and who managed, with the training of a man who had spent 20 years handling other people's surprising situations, to show only the mildest external reaction to the document he was asked to draw up. Clara sat across from him and read every word. She asked 3 questions, requested 2 changes, and signed her name only when she was satisfied with the result. Pratt looked at her when he folded the document. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Or, I suppose, Mrs. Cole, as you'll be registered." "Miss Whitmore will still do for now," she said, "until the arrangement is formalized legally." Pratt glanced at Nathan. "She means when we're married," Nathan said, "which will be handled in town, when Miss Whitmore decides she's ready." Pratt tucked the document into his case with the careful neutrality of a man who understood that this particular situation was going to be discussed at length in his household this evening, and that his wife was going to have many opinions about it, and that the wisest course of action was to remove himself from the premises as quickly as professional dignity allowed. He left. Clara sat in the quiet room and felt the new shape of her life settle around her like something she had just put on for the first time, not uncomfortable but strange. The strangeness of unfamiliar weight. "You need anything?" Nathan asked. "I need my things from the boarding house," she said. "I left most of my books there, and my winter coat." "I'll send someone." "I'll go myself," she said. "I'm not going to hide from Marion Gibbs. I'm not going to hide from anyone." Nathan studied her for a moment. "I'll ride with you." "You don't need to." "No," he said, "but I will." There it was again. That quality in him, not controlling, not overriding her, but simply placing himself beside her without being asked and without making it a production. She didn't have a word for it yet. She would eventually, but that was later. Marion Gibbs opened the door of the boarding house and looked at Clara, and then at Nathan Cole standing slightly behind her, and did not say a single word for what felt like a very long time. Then she said, "Clara, come in." Clara had expected coldness. She had steeled herself for it. Marion was a practical woman, and practical women in the West made practical calculations, and the practical calculation should have landed on the side of distance. But Marion stood back and let her in, and then looked at Nathan with an expression that was difficult to interpret and said, "Mr. Cole, I'd like a word with you." Nathan went. Clara went upstairs to her room. She packed her books first. She had 11 of them, more than she could carry easily. But she would manage because she had always managed, because she had learned the hard way that if you didn't protect the things you valued, no one else would protect them for you. She packed the books, then her clothes, then the small wooden box she kept on the nightstand that contained the only photograph she had of her mother. She was tying her second bag closed when she heard voices downstairs. Not Nathan and Marion. Different voices. She recognized Douglas Carter's voice immediately. She had heard it often enough, had heard it in the same room she was standing in now, the afternoon he had come to the boarding house, unannounced, 9 months ago, to tell her he wasn't the kind of man who could be dismissed, and that she should reconsider. She had not reconsidered. She heard Nathan's voice respond. She couldn't hear the words, but she heard the tone, and the tone was like a door closing, definitive, airless. Then she heard Douglas's voice again, raised now. Clara stopped packing. She put down the bag. She walked to the door of her room and opened it, and stood at the top of the stairs and listened. "Don't know what she's told you," Douglas was saying, "but I can assure you, Nathan, this woman is not what she presents herself to be." "You're going to want to stop talking," Nathan said. "I'm trying to help you. As one man to another, she's been known to be..." "Douglas." Nathan's voice had not changed in volume or in heat. That was what made it effective. "I know what your mother did this morning. I know why she did it. And I know what part you played." A pause. "You're going to walk out of this house. You're not going to say anything else about Clara Whitmore. Not here, not in town, not to anyone. Because if you do..." Another pause. Longer this time, and in some ways worse than words. "You understand me." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. The door. Clara stood at the top of the stairs and waited. Nathan appeared at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at her. His expression was even. Not triumphant, not angry, just present. "Were you listening?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said. "Then I don't have to explain it." Clara looked at him for a moment. She thought about what it cost a man like Nathan Cole to say in front of witnesses what he had just said to Douglas Carter. Douglas would go to his mother. His mother would go to his father. Gerald Carter would do whatever men like Gerald Carter did when their pride was damaged by someone they couldn't afford to punish directly. "You made an enemy today," she said. "I made him one this morning on the street," Nathan said. "That one's already done." He looked up at her. "You packed?" "Almost." "Take your time," he said, and went back to wait by the door. Clara stood at the top of the stairs for one more moment. The house she was leaving was not her home. It had never been her home. It had been a temporary place, a way station, as all her places had been. She had told herself she didn't need more than that. She had told herself the school was the real place, the permanent one, the one that mattered. And then the school had been taken in an hour. She went back into her room and finished packing. The ride back to the Cole Ranch was different from the morning ride. The morning ride had been shock and calculation, two people on either side of a canyon trying to find footing. This ride had something else in it, not ease exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become ease, the earliest, most tentative form of it. "Marion said something to you," Clara said. Nathan glanced at her. "She did." "What?" He was quiet for a moment. "She said you were the best boarder she'd had in 15 years, and she was sorry she hadn't done more this morning." Clara absorbed that. She said that. She also said... He paused. "She said if I wasn't good to you, she would make my life unpleasant in ways I couldn't predict." Something caught in Clara's throat that was not quite a laugh, but was in the same neighborhood. "Marion Gibbs threatened you." "Eloquently," Nathan said. "She's a formidable woman." "She is," Clara said, and she felt something warm move through her that was grief and gratitude. At the same time, the feeling of someone who has been let down by enough people to be genuinely surprised when one of them turns out to still be worth something. They rode in silence for a while. Then Nathan said, "There's something I have to tell you. About the ranch. About what you're walking into." Clara looked at him. "My foreman," he said. "Cal Briggs. He's been with me 12 years. He's loyal, he's good at his job, and he has opinions about things. About how the ranch should be run. About..." He paused. "About women in positions of authority." "He's not going to like this arrangement," Clara said. "He already doesn't know about it, and he already doesn't like it," Nathan said. "He heard in town this morning before I could speak to him." "What did he hear?" "What everyone heard? That I was claiming the child." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "He rode out to find me at the boarding house. Said some things." "What kind of things?" "The kind of things a man says when he thinks he's protecting someone he's loyal to from a mistake he thinks they're making." Nathan said it evenly, but Clara caught the tension underneath it, the particular tension of a man who had defended someone he was still making up his mind about to someone he respected. "I told him it was handled and he should go back to the ranch." "Did he, eventually?" Clara turned this over. "He thinks I'm taking advantage of you. He thinks something like that, yes." "Is he going to make things difficult?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Cal is not a bad man. He's a man who knows one way of seeing things and has spent a long time being right about it. He'll come around when he has evidence to come around to." He glanced at her. "If that matters to you, it matters," Clara said. "I'm not interested in spending my time fighting someone on your own ranch, but I'm also not going to, I won't shrink myself to make him comfortable." "I'm not asking you to," Nathan said. "Make sure he knows that," Clara said. "Make sure he knows it clearly, because if there's going to be a battle on that front, I'd rather have it out in the open in the first week than spend a year fending off something that's never been said directly." Nathan looked at her sideways. And there it was again, that expression. The organizing of his attention around the reality of her. Recalibrating. "I'll talk to Cal," he said. "Good." Clara straightened. "And I'll talk to him myself when I'm ready. I want to do it myself." Nathan said nothing for a moment. Then, "All right." And just like that, another border was drawn. Another small piece of ground was established and held. Cal Briggs was standing in the yard when they rode in. He was 53 years old, weathered in the way of men who had spent their lives outdoors in difficult climates, with the kind of permanent squint that came from 30 years of looking into sun and wind. He had the posture of someone who had decided before getting out of bed that morning that today was going to require certain firmness, and he was maintaining that posture now with the practiced commitment of a man who had made up his mind. He looked at Nathan. He looked at Clara. He looked at the bags tied to the back of Clara's horse. "Mr. Cole," he said. "Cal." Nathan dismounted. "We'll talk this evening. For now, Miss Whitmore needs her bags carried in." A beat. Precise and charged the way silences between men who know each other well can be. "Yes, sir," Cal said. He took the bags. He did not look at Clara. Clara watched him go and filed it carefully. Not hostility exactly. Not yet. Something more like a border he'd drawn himself that he was waiting to see whether she was going to push against. She would. But not today. Today she was going to take her 11 books and her mother's photograph and the small leather wallet with $11 in it into the room that was now technically hers, and she was going to sit down and she was going to allow herself approximately 10 minutes to be a person who had been through an extraordinary and exhausting day and needed to sit down. Then she would get up and figure out what came next. That was how she had always worked. She didn't see any reason to change it now, but she had barely set her bags down, barely taken off her coat, when she heard it hoofbeats in the yard. More than one horse. Coming fast. She went to the window. 4 riders. Men from town by the look of their horses. Coming through the gate without being invited, which meant they were either very confident or carrying authority of some kind, or both. Clara stood at the window and watched them pull up in the yard. And then the tallest one took off his hat and she recognized him. Gerald Carter, Douglas's father, Abigail's husband. The man who sat on the school board and had, according to Abigail, already had the conversation that had ended Clara's position before Clara could even defend herself. He had ridden out to the Cole Ranch. Gerald Carter had ridden out to the Cole Ranch himself, which meant that whatever Douglas had gone home and told his mother, and whatever Abigail had told Gerald, had been enough to bring the most powerful private citizen in Willow Creek Valley out here in person on the same afternoon it had all begun. Clara listened to Nathan's voice in the yard below, even and unhurried the way it always was, and Gerald Carter's voice, which was the voice of a man accustomed to setting the temperature of rooms, and currently finding that the room was not responding the way rooms were supposed to. She picked up her coat. She put it back on. And she went downstairs. Because whatever Gerald Carter had ridden out here to say, he was going to say it with her present. She had earned that much today. She was going to collect it. Gerald Carter was not a man who rode 4 miles on a cold afternoon for conversation. Clara understood that the moment she stepped into the yard and saw his face. He had the look of someone who had prepared remarks, not in the way a reasonable man prepares his thoughts before a difficult discussion, but in the way a man prepares a sentence when he has already decided what the verdict is and just needs to deliver it in the right order to make it stick. He saw her come out, and something shifted in his expression. A small recalibration. He had expected she understood to find Nathan alone. "Miss Whitmore," he said. His voice was perfectly courteous. That was Gerald Carter's particular skill. He could be devastating while sounding like he was doing you a favor. "Mr. Carter," Clara said. She stopped beside Nathan, not behind him. Beside. The distinction mattered, and she was certain Gerald Carter noticed it. "I came to speak with Nathan," Gerald said. "Meaning you can go back inside now." "I'm aware," Clara said. "I thought I'd stay." Gerald looked at Nathan. Nathan said nothing. Gerald adjusted his hat. Nathan, I'll be plain with you. What happened today on the main street, your statement, it's created a situation that needs addressing. The situation on the main street, Nathan said, was created by your wife, before 7 in the morning. A muscle moved in Gerald's jaw. Abigail was concerned. Abigail was protecting Douglas, Nathan said, from the consequence of being told no by a woman who had every right to tell him no. The other 3 men who had ridden out with Gerald were hanging back near the gate, and Clara could feel them listening with the careful attention of men who had learned that powerful employers had complicated situations, and the safest position was always near the exit. Gerald's voice dropped in temperature. My son has nothing to do with this. Your son has everything to do with this, Nathan said. That's why we're standing here. What I am concerned with, Gerald said, pivoting with the practiced smoothness of a man who had been redirecting conversations for 40 years, is the reputation of this valley. The impression that... Gerald. Nathan's voice was quiet and very final. Say what you actually came to say. Another pause. Gerald looked at Clara, and then back at Nathan, and then made the decision Clara could see it, that he had ridden 4 miles and was not going home without saying it. I came to offer you a way out, Gerald said. Before this goes further, you made a statement in the heat of the moment, a generous one. I understand the impulse you felt bad for the woman, but you don't have to hold to it. A quiet correction handled privately. No one needs to know the details. Miss Whitmore receives a small settlement and moves on to the next town, and this whole thing. No, Nathan said. Gerald blinked. Nathan. No. Nathan said again. Same word, same volume. The absolute immovability of it was more effective than anger would have been. Clara stood still and said nothing, and felt something happen in her chest that was complex and layered the furious clarifying sensation of hearing yourself being described as a problem to be settled and quietly moved on, combined with the startling, unfamiliar sensation of watching someone refuse to move when asked to. Gerald looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, not softening but rearranging. He was reassessing. She could see him doing it, and she held his gaze directly and let him look. Miss Whitmore, he said finally, I'm sure you understand that a woman in your position, my position, Clara said, is that I am standing on Nathan Cole's property, which he has invited me to do, having been driven from my home and my employment by a lie your wife constructed to punish me for declining your son's proposal. She kept her voice level. It cost her effort. I understand my position perfectly, Mr. Carter. The question is whether you understand yours. Silence. One of the men near the gate shifted his weight. A horse blew air through its nose. Gerald Carter looked at Clara Whitmore with the expression of a man who has just picked up something he expected to be light and found it considerably heavier than anticipated. This isn't over, he said finally. It was meant to be a warning. It landed more like an admission. I know, Nathan said. Good evening, Gerald. Gerald Carter put his hat back on. He turned his horse, and he rode out of the yard with the 3 other men behind him, and the gate was empty, and the yard was quiet, and Clara let out a breath that she had not realized she was holding. Nathan looked at her. You didn't have to come out, he said. Not a criticism, an observation. Yes, I did, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right, you did. She looked at the empty gate. He's going to come back. Yes, with something worse. Probably. Nathan turned toward the house. But not tonight. Clara followed him inside and thought not tonight was something. It was not everything. But it was something, and in the life she had been living, something was what you worked with. The first week at the Cole Ranch was the strangest week of Clara's adult life. Not because anything dramatic happened. The opposite. The week was quiet, in a way she was entirely unprepared for the particular quiet of a large working operation that has its rhythms and its routines, and into which she had been introduced without fanfare, and within which she was expected to figure out where she fit. She had expected hostility. From the ranch hands from Cal Briggs, from the 100 small daily frictions of being a woman in a place built entirely without one. She had braced for it the way you brace for cold water, tensing against the impact before it hits. What she got instead was something more complicated. The ranch hands were cautious. That was the word for it. They were not unkind. They said good morning. They passed things at the table. But there was a watchfulness to them, the watchfulness of men who had formed their opinion of the situation secondhand and were waiting to see whether the first-hand version confirmed or contradicted it. Cal Briggs was courteous in the way of a man determined to give no ground and no quarter. He said what was necessary. He completed what he was asked. He did not volunteer anything. When Clara passed him in the yard, he nodded. When she spoke to him directly, he answered in the precise number of words required, and not one more. She let it sit. She had said she would talk to him when she was ready, and she was not ready yet. She was still learning the shape of the days. She spent the first 3 days going through the household accounts because Nathan had said she could, and because numbers were honest in a way that people often weren't. What she found in those accounts told her more about Nathan Cole than anything he had said out loud. The ranch was profitable, substantially so. But there were patterns in the spending that she found interesting. Regular payments to 2 families in town that were not labeled in any standard way. A consistent line item for materials that didn't correspond to any structure on the property she'd been told about. On the 4th evening, she brought it to him. "These payments," she said, setting the ledger on the table between them. "The Dawson family and the Reeves family. These aren't wages." Nathan glanced at the ledger. Something crossed his face. "No." "What are they?" He was quiet for a moment. "The Dawsons lost their harvest 2 years ago. Bad season. They had 4 children and no way to make the note on their land. If they'd lost the land..." He paused. "I bought the note from the bank. Let them pay it back without interest however they can manage." Clara looked at him. "And the Reeves?" "Similar situation, different year." She looked at the ledger again. There were other lines she hadn't asked about yet. She was beginning to suspect they all had similar explanations. "You've been doing this quietly," she said. "Not through the church charity board, not through any official channel." "Official channels require people to explain themselves publicly," Nathan said. "Lose their pride in front of the whole town in exchange for help. Some people can't afford to do that." Clara set the ledger down. She looked at this man who had built a reputation in the valley as formidable, solitary, intimidating, and who had been quietly buying strangers' debts and letting them recover their dignity in private, with nobody watching. "Why didn't you tell me this at the start?" she asked. "You didn't ask," he said. "I'm asking now." He met her eyes. "Because I didn't want you to take the arrangement because you felt obligated to a charitable man. I wanted you to take it because the terms made sense for you." Clara sat with that. The fire in the stove, the ledger on the table, the weight of a man who had thought about her decision more carefully than he'd let on. "The school," she said. "When do we start?" Nathan blinked. Whatever he had expected her to say, it wasn't that. "The school. You promised me a school," Clara said. "You said you'd build it. I want to know the timeline. I want to meet the families, talk to the children, assess what materials we need." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm not going to sit in this house and manage accounts indefinitely while we wait for the town to make up its mind about us. I need to work properly. That was the agreement." For the first time since she'd known him, Nathan Cole looked not flustered exactly. Caught off balance was closer. The expression of a man who had been prepared for complications and received instead something entirely unexpected, someone holding him to his word with enthusiasm. "The lumber's already ordered," he said. Now it was her turn to blink. "You ordered lumber." "The day after you arrived," he said. "I told you the school would be built. I meant it." Clara looked at him across the table, and something rearranged itself inside her. Something that had been maintaining a very careful distance, a very deliberate reserve, because she knew the danger of trusting the thing that seemed too good, the thing that seemed too solid, the thing that seemed like it might actually hold. She had learned that lesson the hard way. She was still learning it. But the lumber was already ordered. He had done it before she asked, before she had even had to remind him. "All right," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Then we start next week." The school went up in 12 days. 3 of the ranch hands built it. They were not carpenters. You could see that in the finished product, which was slightly imperfect in ways that made it look more alive than a professional job would have. Clara didn't mind. She had spent 4 years teaching in a schoolhouse that had a window that didn't close properly, and a floorboard near the back row that sounded like a cough every time a child stepped on it. Imperfect buildings were the buildings she knew. On the first morning, 7 children arrived. By the second week, there were 11. By the end of the month, 14, including 2 children from families in town who had heard somehow through the imprecise telegraph of valley gossip that Miss Whitmore was teaching again, and whose parents had privately made the decision to send their children out to the coal ranch for school, rather than wait for the town board to figure out what to do with the classroom that now sat empty. Clara didn't comment on this. She taught. She did what she had always done. She paid attention to which child needed more time with reading, which one lit up for arithmetic, which ones were hiding hunger or fear, or something happening at home behind their eyes. She was good at this work. She had always been good at it. And the particular pleasure of doing it well, of watching a child catch hold of something they hadn't been able to grasp before the moment when the face changes, that was the same here as it had been in town. Better maybe, because she had fought to get here. Cal Briggs watched all of this. She saw him watching. From across the yard, from the doorway of the barn, from a distance that was always precisely enough distance to maintain. He wasn't hostile. He was something more unsettling than hostile. He was withholding judgment in a way that made it clear that judgment was still coming, and that he was taking his time. Clara decided on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, that she was done waiting for Cal Briggs to decide what he thought of her. She found him after the children had gone home in the barn, working through something mechanical, with the systematic efficiency of a man who found machinery easier than people. She stood in the doorway until he looked up. "Mr. Briggs," she said. He straightened. "Miss Whitmore, can I talk to you?" A pause. "I suppose." She came in. She didn't stand back near the door, which would have felt like asking permission. She came to where he was working and stood at a reasonable distance and looked at him directly. "You don't trust me," she said. He didn't flinch. She respected that. "I don't know you," he said. "That's honest," she said. "I appreciate it. I'd rather have honest than polite." She crossed her arms, not defensively, just finding a comfortable position. "So, let me be honest with you. I know what you think happened. You think a woman got herself into trouble somehow, or got lucky somehow, and landed in a situation that benefited her, and potentially cost the man you've been loyal to for 12 years. You think I'm a risk Nathan is taking for reasons that might not be rational. And you're watching to see whether you were right." Cal said nothing. "Here's what's actually true," Clara said. "I was lied about by a woman who wanted to punish me for refusing her son. Nathan saw it happening and did something about it. The arrangement we've made benefits both of us, or it benefits neither of us. I am not here to take advantage of him. I am here because I had nowhere else to go, and because the terms he offered were reasonable." She looked at him steadily. "I'm telling you this because I'm going to be here for a long time, and having you watch me from across the yard like a problem you haven't solved yet is going to get old for both of us." Cal looked at her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable in the way of men who have spent a long time learning to keep their cards close. Then he said, "Helen ran this ranch with him." Clara paused. Helen. Nathan's wife. She was... Cal stopped. Chose his words. She was the reason the place worked in the ways that money doesn't cover. She knew every hand by name. She knew their families. She remembered things. Small things. He looked somewhere past Clara's shoulder. When she died, Nathan, he kept going, because he knows how to keep going. But something went out. You understand what I mean? "Yes," Clara said quietly. "I do. I don't want anyone here who's going to take advantage of that, Cal said. Of the fact that he's lonely and stubborn and doesn't ask for help, and if someone put themselves in a position where he felt responsible for them, he'd hold to it even if it wasn't good for him. That's fair, Clara said. And I'll tell you what I told Nathan on the first morning. I'm not here to be anyone's rescued woman. I'm not here to take up space and be grateful. I'm here to work. You've watched me work for 3 weeks. You tell me what you've seen. Another long pause. I've seen, Cal said slowly, 14 children who come here every morning like they can't wait to get here. He looked back at her. I've seen the Reeves boy Jimmy, who I've known since he was born, and who never talked much talking to you yesterday about something in a book for about 20 minutes. He loves stories, Clara said. He just needed someone to listen. Cal looked at her. All right, he said, not warmly. Not with any great enthusiasm, but with the particular quality of a man who has made a decision based on evidence and is willing to say so. All right. That was Cal Briggs giving ground. Clara understood that was not nothing. Thank you, she said, for saying it plain. She left him in the barn and went back to the house. And when she came in, Nathan was at the table with a cup of coffee and looked up when she came in and could see from her face that something had happened. Cal, he said. We had a conversation, she said. And I think it's going to be all right. She sat down. He told me about Helen. Nathan went very still. Did he? He loves this place, Clara said. He's protecting it the only way he knows how. She looked at Nathan. He told me she was the reason the place worked, in the ways money doesn't cover. A long silence. She was, Nathan said. His voice was even, carefully even. Tell me about her, Clara said. Nathan looked up. Only if you want to, she added. You don't have to. He was quiet for a moment. Then, she was funny. That was the thing people didn't expect. She looked... He paused. She looked serious, quiet. People assumed she was reserved, and then she'd say something and the whole room would go. He stopped. Something moved across his face. She died in February. It was fast. 1 week she was fine, and then the fever, and then... He stopped again. I'm sorry, Clara said. It was 6 years ago, he said. The way men said that when they meant, I have decided this is not something I am still affected by, when you could see plainly that they were still affected by it. Time doesn't always fix things, Clara said. Sometimes it just teaches you to carry them better. Nathan looked at her. It was a longer look than the ones before it. The kind of look that happens when a person says something true in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. Yes, he said. That's exactly right. The fire, the coffee, the quiet kitchen of a large house that had too much quiet in it. Clara picked up her coffee cup and held it with both hands, and thought, this is the strangest life I have ever lived, and it is also somehow the most solid ground I have stood on. She held that thought carefully because it frightened her a little. Because the last time she had found solid ground, she had let herself need it, and it had been taken away in a single morning. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It came addressed to Nathan Cole, return address, the office of Gerald Carter, and Clara knew, when she saw it on the table, Nathan had set it there unopened, waiting for her to be present when he read it, which told her something about how much things had shifted in the past 3 weeks, that it was not a social correspondence. Nathan opened it. He read it. He set it down. What does it say? Clara asked. Gerald has filed a complaint with the Territorial Land Office, Nathan said, alleging irregularities in the Cole Ranch water rights. Clara looked at him. Water rights. The creek that runs through the eastern quarter of my land. Gerald has filed that my documentation of the original water claim is fraudulent. Nathan's voice was very calm. The calm that Clara had come to understand was not indifference, but its opposite, the calm of a man who becomes more controlled the more serious the situation becomes. He's claiming the rights belong to him. Can he win? He doesn't need to win, Nathan said. A contested claim creates a legal cloud. Legal clouds cost money to resolve freeze operations while they're pending and... He stopped. The eastern quarter feeds the main herd. If I can't guarantee that water, the cattle contracts for spring become complicated. Clara looked at the letter on the table. This was the something worse she had predicted on the afternoon Gerald Carter rode out and left without getting what he came for. Not another social confrontation, not another public maneuver, something quieter and more structural. The kind of attack that didn't happen on a main street in front of witnesses, but in the back corridors of territorial administration, where witnesses were expensive and difficult to arrange. He's not doing this to win the water rights, she said. No, Nathan said. He's doing this to cost you enough that you decide I'm not worth it. Nathan looked at her. Is he right? She asked. She asked it directly because she had decided in the first week that between the two of them, directness was the only currency worth using. No, Nathan said. You're sure? Because I want you to think about it, actually. Not just say no because it's the answer that... Clara. Her name for the first time instead of Miss Whitmore. No, I'm not going to hand Gerald Carter that. Not because of pride, because it's wrong. What was done to you was wrong, and I am not going to let the cost of fixing it make me participate in it. She looked at him, the firelight, his face, the absolute quiet certainty in it. She said, Then we fight it. Yes, he said. We do. Tell me what you need. Documents, correspondence, tell me what to pull and I'll start tonight. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and in that look was something new. Not the careful distance of the first days, not the measured generosity of the arrangement. Something warmer. Something that had been building for 3 weeks, fed by 7 in the morning conversations and evening account books, and the sight of 14 children arriving at a schoolhouse that hadn't existed a month ago. The original filing is in the strong box in the office, he said. And there are letters from the previous owner. If Gerald is claiming the documentation is fraudulent, we need to establish the chain of... I'll start with the strong box, Clara said. She stood up. Clara. He said her name again. Same quiet way. She looked back. Thank you, he said. She held his gaze for just a moment. We made an agreement, she said. I intend to keep it. She went to the office. She opened the strong box, and she found something that was not the original filing. She found a second document, underneath the filing, in a different hand, with Gerald Carter's signature at the bottom and a date 18 months ago, and language that was not a water rights claim. It was a purchase agreement, unsigned on Nathan's side, drawn up unilaterally, claiming that Nathan Cole had verbally agreed to sell the eastern quarter of his ranch to Gerald Carter for a sum that was less than a third of its value. A document that didn't exist until this moment, that Gerald Carter had somehow placed inside Nathan Cole's own strongbox. Clara stood in the quiet office with that document in her hands and understood this was not a legal challenge. This was a frame. Gerald Carter was not fighting for water rights. He was manufacturing the evidence of a transaction that had never occurred, and someone with access to this property, access to this strongbox, had helped him do it. She walked back to the main room. Nathan looked up. She set the document on the table in front of him. He read it. The silence that followed was the most dangerous silence she had felt since the morning in the schoolhouse. This is not mine, Nathan said. His voice was very quiet. I never signed this. I never agreed to any of this. I know, Clara said. Someone put it there. Nathan looked up at her. In his eyes, the cold, controlled fury of a man who has just understood the full shape of what he's facing. Someone who has access to this house, he said. They looked at each other, and the name neither of them wanted to say settled between them like a stone dropped in still water. Someone on the ranch. Nathan did not sleep that night. Clara knew because she didn't sleep either, and the house had a particular quality of quiet that only exists when two people are separately awake in it, both of them thinking about the same thing, and neither of them willing to be the first to knock on the other's door. She lay in her room with the forged document on her mind and went through the list the way she would go through a problem on a chalkboard methodically, without letting emotion run ahead of the evidence. Who had access to the strongbox? Who knew where it was kept? Who had been inside the office in the past weeks, the past months, the past year? The list was short. Nathan, Cal Briggs, the two senior hands who sometimes came into the office to sign their wage slips, and one other person who had been in and out of this house with the easy familiarity of someone who had long ago stopped needing to announce himself. She was at the kitchen table before dawn, with the ledger open when Nathan came in. He looked at her and she looked at him, and neither of them said good morning, because good morning seemed beside the point. "You have a name?" he said. Not a question. "I have the same name you have," she said. "I just don't want to say it before we're sure." Nathan sat down. He pressed both hands flat on the table, a gesture she had come to recognize as the physical equivalent of him organizing his thoughts into a structure he could manage. "Walk me through it," he said. "The strongbox key," Clara said. "Who has a copy besides you?" "Cal," Nathan said. "Only Cal." "And the office? Who goes in there freely?" "Cal." "The senior hands for wages?" "Me." He stopped. "You now." "I didn't put it there," she said. "I know that." "Then we're saying Cal's name," Clara said. The silence that followed was the kind that happens when a truth lands that neither person wanted to be true. Nathan's face didn't collapse, but something in it, some load-bearing element that had been holding steady, shifted. 12 years, he said. "I know. He has been with this ranch since before Helen died. He helped me when she was sick. He ran the operations entirely so I could be with her. He was—" Nathan stopped. "He is not a bad man." "No," Clara said. "He isn't. But he may have done a bad thing for what felt to him like a good reason." Nathan looked at her. "He doesn't trust me," Clara said. "He told me so himself in more polite language. He thinks you're making a mistake, and he thinks I'm the cause of it. If Gerald Carter came to him, offered him something, or simply appealed to his loyalty to you in the wrong way, told him this was the only way to protect the ranch from what I was going to cost you." She paused. "Cal Briggs would do something terrible if he believed it was for you." Nathan stood up from the table. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to her for a long moment. "He would," he said. "God help him, he would." Clara waited. "I have to ask him," Nathan said. He said it quietly, the way you say something you've already decided. "Yes," Clara said. "You do." "This morning." "Yes." Nathan turned from his window. His face had the expression of a man walking toward something that was going to cost him considerably, and who had decided that the cost didn't change what needed to be done. "Make coffee," he said. "I want to talk to him here, in the kitchen, not in the yard." Clara made the coffee. Cal Briggs came in at 6:30 the way he always did, hung his coat on the hook by the door the way he always did, and stopped when he saw the two of them sitting at the table and the particular quality of the quiet in the room. He was a man who had spent 53 years reading situations. He read this one in about 4 seconds. He sat down without being asked. Nathan pushed the forged document across the table. Cal looked at it for a long time. When he looked up, his face was the face of a man who has been caught, but not by an enemy. Worse than that, by someone he loved. "Nathan?" "Tell me I'm wrong," Nathan said. "Tell me you didn't put that there." Cal's jaw worked. His hands flat on the table were the hands of a man trying to find something to hold on to. "He came to me 2 weeks ago," Cal said. His voice was rough. "Carter, he said she was going to cost you the ranch, that she'd already turned your head, and that if it kept going, the land deal would go through anyway, but as a legal seizure, and you'd get nothing instead of—" He stopped, looked at the document. "He said you'd already verbally agreed to the quarter sale before all this started, that this was just getting it in writing for your benefit so you'd have something to show. He said you'd forgotten you'd agreed to it." "That is a lie," Nathan said. "I know that now," Cal said. "Did you know it then?" A long pause. Painful. I wasn't sure." He was... Cal looked up, and in his eyes was something Clara had not expected to see there. Not defiance, not calculation, but genuine anguished confusion. He was convincing, and I was already worried. About her. He glanced at Clara, and then away. I thought he was right that she'd... Stop, Nathan said. Cal stopped. You put a fraudulent document in my strongbox, Nathan said. Using my key, in my house. You did that. Yes, Cal said. Just the word. Stripped of everything else. To protect me, Nathan said. You thought wrong, Nathan said. About her, about me, about what I need protecting from. He leaned forward. Cal, you have been with this ranch for 12 years, and I have trusted you with everything. Everything. And you used that trust to help a man who wants to take my land because I refused to let him destroy a woman who did nothing wrong. Cal's eyes were wet, not quite crying, the particular wet-eyed stillness of a man who is managing tears by sheer force of will, because he has decided that crying right now would be one indignity too many. I'm sorry, he said. Nathan, I'm sorry. Clara sat very still. Nathan stood up. He walked to the window again. The kitchen was absolutely silent except for the fire in the stove. When Nathan spoke, his voice was not angry. That was almost harder to hear than anger would have been. You can't stay, he said. You know that. Cal closed his eyes briefly. I know. I'll pay you what's owed through the end of the month. I'll write a letter of reference not for what happened here, but for 12 years of work that was real and good. Nathan's voice cracked slightly on the last word, and then steadied. But you have to go. I know, Cal said again. He pushed the document back across the table. He looked at Clara directly for the first time without deflection. I was wrong about you, he said. What I did, I told myself I was protecting him. But I was protecting what I was afraid of losing. He looked back at Nathan. I didn't know the difference. He stood up. He took his coat from the hook. He left. The door closed and the kitchen was very quiet, and Nathan stood at the window, and Clara sat at the table, and neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Clara said, I'm sorry. This is my fault. Nathan turned around. No. If I hadn't come here, then Cal would have found some other way to do something like this, Nathan said. For some other reason, and I would not have been there to see it, and the land would have been gone, and I would never have known why. He came back to the table. He sat down. He looked at her with the direct, unguarded expression of a man who is too tired for anything but honesty. You didn't do this, Clara. She looked at him. You just called me Clara again. You've been Clara for 3 weeks, he said. I just keep forgetting to say it. Something shifted between them in that moment. The same kind of shift that happens when two people who have been standing at a careful distance take one step closer without meaning to, and then realize they have, and decide not to step back. The forged document changed everything and nothing at the same time. It changed things because now they had proof not just of the water rights fraud, but of a coordinated scheme to manufacture evidence against Nathan's interests. Gerald Carter's name was on that document. His scheme, his signature, his risk, and a forged document placed in a locked strongbox was the kind of evidence that could not be explained away with Gerald Carter's usual careful rhetoric. It changed nothing because Gerald Carter was still the most powerful private man in Willow Creek Valley, and powerful men had a way of making evidence complicated. Nathan sent for his lawyer that afternoon. Aldrich Pratt came out on a fast horse and read the document twice, and then looked at both of them over the tops of his spectacles with the expression of a man who has been waiting for the other shoe to drop and is now watching it fall. This is serious, Pratt said. I know, Nathan said. This document being placed in your strongbox, do you have a witness to where it was found? To the circumstances? I found it, Clara said. I can testify to that. Pratt looked at her. You understand that Gerald Carter's position will be that you planted it. Then let him say that in front of a judge, Clara said, while Cal Briggs is sitting in the room. Pratt blinked. Briggs. You have Briggs's testimony. He'll testify, Nathan said. I believe that. You're confident of that. I am, Nathan said. And he said it with the certainty of a man who knows someone's character, even when that character has failed him, who understood the difference between what Cal Briggs had done and what Cal Briggs was. Pratt set down the document. He pressed his fingers together. All right, here is what I can do. I can file a counter-complaint with the Territorial Office fraud and conspiracy to commit land theft. I can request an emergency injunction against the water rights claim pending investigation. And I can request a formal hearing before the circuit judge, who is due in this district in... He consulted something in his memory. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Nathan said. Gerald will try to settle before the hearing, Pratt said. When he understands the shape of what you have on him. He will not want this aired in front of a judge. I don't want to settle, Nathan said. Pratt looked at him carefully. You understand that going to hearing means public proceedings. Everything comes out. The original rumor, your arrangement with Miss Whitmore, the forged document, Cal Briggs's testimony, all of it. In front of the circuit judge and anyone who cares to attend. Everything coming out, Nathan said steadily, is what I want. Pratt looked at Clara. Everything coming out, Clara agreed, is the only thing that actually ends it. Pratt nodded once. I'll file in the morning. The 6 weeks before the hearing were the strangest and most clarifying weeks of Clara's life. Strange because the ranch settled into something after Cal's departure that she hadn't expected, not disorder, but a different kind of order. Nathan took on more directly himself, worked longer hours, and the senior hands stepped up with the quiet competence of people who know what they're doing and have simply been waiting to be trusted with it. And Clara found herself more integrated into the day-to-day of the operation than the original arrangement had specified, not because she had been asked, but because she was there and she was capable and the work needed doing. She kept the accounts. She ran the school. She wrote letters to witnesses on Nathan's behalf, drafted correspondence for Pratt, organized the documentation that was going to form the backbone of their case. She worked in the evenings at the kitchen table, while Nathan worked across from her, and the silence between them was no longer the careful silence of strangers. It was the comfortable, productive silence of two people who had learned each other's rhythms. She noticed things about him that she hadn't had room to notice in the first weeks. He was punctual to the point of predictability every morning, same time, same routine, but not rigid. When one of the younger hands made a mistake that cost the operation 2 hours of work, Nathan corrected him with the patience of someone who remembered making his own mistakes and considered it a reasonable cost of bringing someone along. He read in the evenings, history mostly. Sometimes he would look up from a book and say something about it, not because he needed to, but because the thought was interesting and she was there. She noticed that he laughed quietly. Not the big performing laugh of men who wanted you to know they were amused. A small, genuine sound that happened when something caught him off guard in a way he hadn't been prepared for. She noticed that he watched her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. She didn't mention it. 3 weeks before the hearing, a writer came from town with a sealed letter from Gerald Carter addressed to Nathan Cole. Nathan read it and passed it to Clara without comment. Gerald Carter was offering to withdraw the water rights claim, pay Nathan's legal costs, and issue a written correction through the town council, a formal acknowledgement that the original rumor about Clara had been spread without factual basis in exchange for Nathan dropping the fraud complaint. Clara read it twice. He's scared, she said. Yes, he should be. She set the letter down. He's offering almost everything we'd get from the hearing without actually admitting his name was on a forged document. Yes, Nathan said. The hearing would make it public record, Clara said. What he did, what Abigail did, the whole scheme. In writing in a territorial court, permanent. She looked at Nathan. The settlement doesn't do that. No, Nathan said. It doesn't. What do you want to do? Nathan looked at her. And there it was, The thing that had been building for weeks, that had started in a kitchen on the morning they'd found the forged document that had been fed by every evening at the table, and every quiet laugh, and every moment he'd watched her from across the room. "I want to do what you want to do," he said. "It's your name, Clara. It's your life. The ranch, I can protect the ranch other ways if I have to. But the hearing is the only way to completely clear your name in this territory in writing in a way no one can quietly revise later." Clara looked at the letter. She thought about the morning in the schoolhouse, the three women, the sound of Abigail Carter's gloves being picked up off the desk with the precise, unhurried movement of someone who knows she has already won. She thought about Emma Hayes looking down at the street. She thought about 14 children who came to a ranch school every morning because the town board still hadn't reinstated her, and whose parents had made a quiet private decision to drive them 4 miles out of town, rather than let them fall behind, which was its own kind of answer about who the community actually trusted. "We go to the hearing," Clara said. Nathan nodded. "Yes." "And I want to speak," she said. "I don't want Pratt to do all the talking. I want to say some of it myself." Nathan looked at her steadily. "All right. You're not going to tell me it's risky, or that it might not look—" "No," he said. "You've earned the right to speak. I'm not going to take that from you." She looked at him for a moment. There were things inside her chest that had been organizing themselves for weeks, things that had started small and careful, and had been building with the patient, unstoppable quality of water, finding its level. She didn't say them yet, but she was aware of them, and she thought from the way he was looking at her that he was aware of them too. 2 nights before the hearing, Abigail Carter came to the ranch. Alone. No Gerald. No Douglas. Just Abigail Carter on a horse at the gate in the early evening, which was so unexpected that the hand who came to tell Nathan about it looked like a man reporting a hallucination. Nathan came out. Clara came with him. Abigail looked different from the last time Clara had seen her. The iron certainty that had characterized her in the schoolhouse and on the main street was still present, but it was wearing differently now, the way a garment wears when the person inside it is carrying more weight than it was designed for. She looked at Clara. "I want to speak to you," she said. "Without Nathan." "No," Clara said. Abigail's chin went up. "I have something to say that—" "Then say it with Nathan present," Clara said. "There are no more private conversations between you and me, Mrs. Carter. Whatever you have to say, you say in front of a witness." Abigail sat with that for a moment. Then she dismounted and tied her horse and stood in front of both of them with the bearing of a woman who has made a very long decision and is now going to execute it. "I want you to accept Gerald's offer," she said. "Withdraw the fraud complaint. Take the correction and the legal costs." "We've declined that," Nathan said. "I'm not asking you," Abigail said. She looked at Clara. "I'm asking her." Clara said nothing. Let her continue. "Douglas is what Gerald did with the document, the scheme." Abigail stopped. Something crossed her face that was not quite shame, but was in the same territory. "Douglas didn't know Gerald was going to do that. He told me today. He didn't know his father had gone that far, and he—" She stopped again. "He's not a good man, my son. I know that. He's been given too much and expected too little, and that is on me. On Gerald. Not only on him." She said it with the difficulty of someone admitting something they have spent years not admitting. "But he did not know about the document. What Douglas knew or didn't know," Clara said carefully, "doesn't change what your husband did, or what you did, on that morning in the schoolhouse." "I know that," Abigail said. "Do you—" Clara held her gaze. "You walked into my place of work with 2 witnesses and told me my employment was over. You used your husband's position on the school board to have me removed before I could say a single word in my own defense. You watched me stand on that street, and you said nothing." Her voice was steady. She had rehearsed none of this. It was coming from somewhere deeper than rehearsal. "You didn't spread a rumor about me because you were concerned about morality or the children or anything you claimed to be concerned about. You did it because your son was embarrassed, and you decided that my life was the appropriate price. Abigail said nothing. So when you stand here and tell me about Douglas not knowing, Clara said, I need you to understand that I am not moved by that. I am not moved by the idea that one member of your family was slightly less deliberate than the others in his cruelty. Abigail's throat worked. What do you want? She said. The question came out stripped of its usual armor. Just the question, raw and direct. What would make this what would... The truth, Clara said. In front of a judge, in writing, permanently. That will destroy Gerald, Abigail said. Yes, Clara said. It might. And what you did destroyed my life in an afternoon. She looked at this woman not with hatred and not with pity, but with something clearer and more lasting than either. Mrs. Carter, I do not wish your family ill. I do not want Gerald in prison or Douglas ruined or you humiliated beyond what is fair. But I will not trade my permanent record for your temporary comfort. I have spent my whole life being the woman who could be moved out of the way when she became inconvenient. I am not moving. The yard was very quiet. Abigail Carter looked at Clara Whitmore for a long time. Then she did something no one, including Clara, including Nathan, had expected. She said, I'll testify. Clara stared at her. At the hearing, Abigail said, I'll testify. To what I did, to why. To the fact that you had done nothing wrong, and I knew it from the beginning. She said it with the horrible necessary courage of a woman setting down something very heavy that she has been carrying for too long. I can't make Gerald's document disappear. I can't undo what's been filed, but I can tell the truth about my part in it. Nathan beside Clara went very still. Clara looked at Abigail Carter. She looked at the woman who had walked into her schoolhouse and dismantled her life with the careful precision of someone who had decided that precision was the same as righteousness. She looked at the woman who was now offering to stand up in front of a circuit judge and say, I was wrong, and I knew I was wrong. Why? Clara said. Abigail looked at her hands, then up. Because I looked at what Gerald did. The document, the scheme. And I understood that I started it. Whatever he did, I gave him the beginning of it. She paused. And because I have a granddaughter, she said. Douglas's sister's daughter. She's 3 years old. And I don't want to be a woman whose granddaughter grows up learning that what I did is how you handle things. The silence stretched. Nathan glanced at Clara. Clara looked at Abigail Carter for a long moment. She was thinking about all of the ways this could still be a maneuver. A calculated sacrifice of Abigail's pride to minimize the damage to Gerald. A performance of contrition designed to soften the judge before the case began. And then she thought it doesn't matter. True contrition and strategic contrition produce the same testimony. The truth was the truth regardless of what it cost. Talk to Pratt, Clara said. Tomorrow morning. Tell him everything. Abigail nodded. She untied her horse. She mounted. She looked at Clara one more time. I'm sorry, she said. Just those 2 words without ornamentation. She rode out. Nathan and Clara stood in the yard and watched her go. I did not see that coming, Nathan said. Neither did I, Clara said. She stood in the cooling evening air and felt the shape of the next 2 days ahead of her, the hearing the judge, the public accounting of everything that had happened since that October morning when she had walked into her schoolhouse and found 3 women and the end of the life she had built. She felt the weight of it, and she also felt underneath the weight something else. Something that was beginning to feel like ground. Nathan was standing beside her. Close not by design, but by the natural drift of 2 people who have been standing together long enough that space between them becomes the thing that requires effort. Clara, he said. She looked at him. In the fading light in the quiet yard, with everything that was coming still ahead of them, she looked at him and saw the man who had stood up on a main street and said, "It is mine," meaning her trouble and her dignity and her right to stay, and who had meant something much more than what the words literally contained. "I know," she said. "Whatever you're going to say, I know." "Do you?" he said. "I think so," she said. "I've been thinking about it for a while." "So have I," he said. She looked at him steadily. "After the hearing," she said. "Say it then, when it's over, when all of this is—" She paused. "I want to hear it when there's nothing else in the way." He held her gaze. "All right," he said. "After." They went back inside. 2 more days, and everything was about to come into the open. The morning of the hearing, Clara was up before the sun. Not because she was afraid. She had moved past afraid, somewhere around the 3rd week at the ranch, somewhere between the forged document and Abigail Carter's unexpected confession in the yard. What she felt now was something different, the particular alertness of someone who has been moving toward a fixed point for a long time and can finally see it clearly. She dressed carefully. Not to impress, she understood that the circuit judge was going to form his opinion on the basis of evidence and testimony, not on what she wore. But there was something in the act of dressing carefully that was about herself, about the version of herself she wanted to be in that room. She had spent enough time in her life being looked at as a problem, a rumor, a complication. Today, she was going to walk into a room as a witness, and a woman with a case, and the truth entirely on her side, and she wanted her posture and her clothing, and every line of her to communicate that she knew exactly where she stood. Nathan was in the kitchen, coffee made, bread on the table, same as every morning. That steadiness, the absolute reliability of it, struck her somewhere that had nothing to do with this morning and everything to do with all the mornings before it. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her. Just for a moment, the same look she had been cataloging for weeks, the one that had started as careful and become something else entirely. "You're going to be fine," he said. "I know," she said. Not bravado, just true. They rode into Willow Creek together. The hearing was held in the largest room of the Territorial Land Office, which in a town the size of Willow Creek meant it was still a relatively small space that became immediately overcrowded the moment more than 15 people tried to occupy it. There were considerably more than 15 people present. Clara had known the town would come. That was the nature of a place like this proceedings that involved the most powerful rancher in the valley, the most powerful merchant, and a schoolteacher who had become the most talked about woman in 3 counties, were not proceedings that people stayed home from. They came for the story. She understood that. She didn't resent it. If they were here for the story, then the story they were going to hear was going to be the true one. And after weeks of the valley running on rumor and half information and Gerald Carter's carefully managed narrative, she found she was almost glad of the audience. The circuit judge was a man named Harlan Ives, 60 years old, with the kind of face that gave away very little and eyes that gave away slightly more than the face intended. He had ridden in the previous evening, and Pratt had briefed him for 2 hours, and he sat at the front of the room now with the document spread before him, and the expression of a man who had seen a great many things in his years on the circuit and was prepared to see a few more. Gerald Carter was seated to the left with his own lawyer, a man who had come up from Helena specifically for this, and who had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to winning through procedural complexity rather than factual argument. Gerald himself was immaculate pressed suit, controlled expression, the face of a man who had decided that performance was a form of defense. Beside him, Douglas sat with the careful stillness of someone who had been told very precisely how to sit. Abigail was not with them. That was the first thing Clara noticed. Abigail Carter was not at the table with her husband and son. She was seated on the far side of the room alone with a posture that was composed, and something underneath it that was not. Gerald had seen where his wife was sitting. Clara could tell from the set of his jaw that this particular piece of information had reached him very recently, and that he was managing a response to it that he could not afford to show. Pratt leaned to Clara and said quietly, "She's here." "I see that," Clara said. "Gerald doesn't know she came to talk to me," Pratt said. "He's going to find out in about 20 minutes. "Good," Clara said. The proceedings opened with the formal reading of the complaints, the original water rights claim. Nathan's counter-complaint, the fraud allegation, the chain of documentation. Judge Ives read everything with the unhurried thoroughness of a man who believed that paperwork told you things people preferred not to say out loud. Gerald's lawyer went first. He was good. Clara gave him that. He built the argument with the architectural confidence of someone who had constructed this kind of case many times. The suggestion that the document found in the strongbox had been placed there after the fact, by someone with a vested interest in the outcome. The implication that the water rights claim had legitimate historical basis, the careful, systematic undermining of the timeline Pratt had established. He did not name Clara directly, but he didn't need to. The shape of what he was describing, someone with recent access to the house, someone with motivation to manufacture a defense, was precise enough that everyone in the room understood what he was pointing at. Clara felt Nathan seated beside her go very still. She put her hand briefly on the table between them, not touching him, just near. He saw it, and the tension in his jaw released slightly. Pratt argued the counter. He was methodical, and he was thorough, and he was, by Clara's assessment, good at what he did. He laid out the chain of evidence, the timeline, the testimony they had gathered. He presented the original water rights documentation letters from the previous owner, filed claims dated and witnessed in the territorial records. He presented the forged document alongside a handwriting analysis that Pratt had quietly commissioned from a specialist who had been on the circuit for other business and was willing to render an opinion. The analysis was clear. The signature on the forged document, Gerald Carter's signature, was genuine. The document around it was not. Judge Ives looked at the analysis for a long time. Gerald's lawyer began to object. Judge Ives looked at him over the top of the analysis report in a way that suggested the objection was not going to be productive, and the lawyer reconsidered. Then Pratt called his witnesses. Cal Briggs came in from the side of the room where he had been sitting since before Clara and Nathan arrived. He had cleaned himself up. He was wearing his good coat, and his face had the expression of a man who has made a decision that costs him and has decided the cost is right. He sat in the chair across from Judge Ives, and he told the truth. All of it. How Gerald Carter had come to him. What Gerald had said. What Cal had done. What he had understood only afterward about what he had actually participated in. He did not minimize. He did not deflect. He said, "I placed the document in the strongbox. I used a key that was given to me in trust. I did it because I believed I was protecting the ranch, and I was wrong about what I was actually doing." Clara watched Gerald Carter's face during Cal's testimony. The controlled performance was beginning to fracture at the edges. Not visibly, not to most people in the room, but Clara had been reading faces for 24 years, the faces of children who were frightened and hiding it, of women who were angry and concealing it, of men who were wrong and defending it. She could see the fracture. She could see the moment when Gerald Carter understood that the day was not going to go the way he had arranged it. Then Pratt called Abigail Carter. The room changed. Clara heard it, the collective physical intake of breath that happened when Abigail Carter stood up from the far side of the room and walked to the front and sat in the witness chair and did not look at her husband once during the entire walk. Gerald said something to his lawyer in a voice too low for the room to hear. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Gerald shook it off. Judge Ives looked at Abigail. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you understand you're not required to testify." "I understand," Abigail said. "I'm choosing to." She told it plainly. Not with drama, if anything. The plainness was more devastating than drama would have been. She said she had constructed the rumor to punish Clara for refusing Douglas. She said she had organized the mourning in the schoolhouse. She said she had used Gerald's position on the school board to have Clara removed before Clara could defend herself. She said she had known from the beginning that the rumor was entirely false. She said, "Miss Whitmore did nothing wrong. I did what I did because I was angry and because I could. That is the complete truth." The room was absolutely silent. Douglas Carter, beside his father, looked at the floor. Gerald Carter looked at his wife across the room with an expression that Clara could not fully categorize, not just anger, though anger was in it. Something more complex. The expression of a man looking at someone he thought he knew and finding something in them he had not previously detected. Judge Ives wrote something. Then he looked at Clara. "Miss Whitmore, you've asked to address the court directly." Pratt had warned her that the judge might decline this. He hadn't declined. Clara stood up. She had thought about what she was going to say. She had thought about it for 2 nights, lying awake in the cedar-smelling room at the ranch, going through it word by word. But standing in front of the room now, in front of the judge and the Carters and the assembled town and Nathan beside her, she found that what she had prepared felt insufficient, too constructed, too careful for what the moment actually required. She set the prepared words aside. "I came to Willow Creek Valley 4 years ago," she said. "I came with nothing except the ability to teach, and I spent 4 years building something out of that. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't have family here. I had a reputation and a job and a room at a boarding house, and I was 24 years old, and I thought, I honestly believed that if you worked hard and treated people with respect and kept your conduct above reproach, those things were enough, that they were sufficient to protect you." She looked at the room. "They were not sufficient," she said. "One morning was enough to take all of it. One lie told by one woman who had access to the right people, and everything I had spent 4 years building was gone before I could say a single word. I was tried and convicted in the span of an hour by a town that had known me for 4 years and decided that the rumor was more reliable than the record." She let that sit for a moment. "I am not standing here today asking for sympathy," she said. "I am standing here to say in front of this judge and this room that what was done to me was deliberate and coordinated and carried out by people with power who used that power to punish someone who had none. And I want it in the record, permanently. Not because I need validation from this town, I have stopped needing that, but because there are other women in this territory in the same position I was in, with the same absence of legal protection, and they deserve to know that there is a record. That someone somewhere stood up and said this happened, and it was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise to make anyone comfortable." The room was very still. Judge Ives looked at her for a long moment. Then he wrote something else. Clara sat down. Nathan's hand was on the table beside hers, not performing anything, just there. She looked at it, and then looked at him, and he looked back at her, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wasn't already visible in his face. Judge Ives deliberated for 40 minutes. He came back and read his ruling without preamble. The water rights claim was dismissed. The original Cole Ranch documentation was found legitimate, and the Carter claim fraudulent. Gerald Carter and his lawyer from Helena were directed to pay Nathan's legal costs in full. The forged document was entered permanently into the territorial record as evidence of attempted land fraud, with Gerald Carter's name attached to it in perpetuity. And then the part Clara had not known to hope for, Judge Ives looked up from the ruling and said, "With respect to the damage done to Miss Clara Whitmore's professional reputation through the deliberate and coordinated spread of false information, this court directs the Willow Creek Town Council to enter a formal written correction into the town record to be posted publicly, stating that Miss Whitmore was found by this court to have engaged in no conduct whatsoever giving rise to the rumors spread against her, and that her removal from the school position was undertaken on false pretenses." He looked at Gerald Carter. "I would also recommend strongly, Mr. Carter, that you consider very carefully your next steps. What has been entered into the territorial record today does not disappear. It follows a man." Gerald Carter said nothing. His lawyer said something quietly to him. Gerald nodded. Once. The nod of a man who has lost and has enough intelligence to understand precisely how completely he has lost. Aldrich Pratt leaned to Clara. "That's as good as it gets," he said quietly. "That's better than I expected." Clara looked at the front of the room, at the judge closing his documents, at Abigail Carter still seated, hands folded, looking at nothing in particular, with the expression of someone who has done the necessary thing and is now simply sitting with the weight of it, at Gerald Carter talking to his lawyer in a low, controlled voice, the careful management of a man who is already constructing the next version of the story he will tell about today. At Douglas, who had not looked up once during the entire proceeding. She felt Nathan stand beside her. She stood with him. And when they turned to walk out of the room, she found the path was not as clear as she'd expected, because the people of Willow Creek were in their way, and the people of Willow Creek were not moving to let them through so much as moving toward them. Marion Gibbs reached her first. "Clara," she said, just her name. And the way she said it held 4 weeks of something that had been building since the morning she'd let Clara in the boarding house door and looked at Nathan Cole and made her decision. Emma Hayes was 3 people back. When she reached Clara, her eyes were wet. "I looked away," she said. "On the street that morning. I have no excuse for that." Clara looked at her. At the friend who had looked down at the street while she was being publicly destroyed. At the face of someone who had known what was happening and made the calculation self-preservation social standing, the ordinary cowardice of ordinary people under social pressure, and who had then spent 4 weeks living with the fact that she had made it. "I know why you did it," Clara said. "That doesn't make it." "No," Clara said. "It doesn't. But you're here now." Emma Hayes put both hands over her face for a moment. Then she pulled them down and straightened. "The school board met yesterday," she said. "After Pratt filed the counter-complaint. My husband is on the board. They voted. They want you back." Clara said nothing for a moment. "The town school," Emma said. "They want you back in the town school." Clara looked at Nathan beside her. He was watching her with the careful, unreadable expression of a man who has decided that whatever she says next is entirely her decision, and he is not going to influence it by so much as a change in his breathing. "Tell them thank you," Clara said, "and tell them the school at the Cole Ranch will continue to operate." Emma blinked. "Both?" "Both," Clara said. "We have room for both." They rode home in the late afternoon with the hearing behind them, and the territory record changed, and the cold October air carrying the particular clarity of a day that has been significant. Clara didn't speak for the first mile. Not because there was nothing to say. Because there was too much, and she was organizing it. Nathan rode beside her and waited the way he had learned to wait, not impatiently, not performatively, just actually there. "She surprised me," Clara said. "Abigail. She surprised everyone," Nathan said. "I keep trying to decide how I feel about it." Clara looked at the road ahead. "Whether the apology changes anything, whether it should." "What do you think?" "I think—" She paused. "I think it changes something and doesn't change everything. What she did was still done. But there's a difference between someone who doubles down and someone who doesn't." She looked at him. "I don't know if I forgive her. I don't think that's a decision you make in an afternoon. But I think I can let it not be the thing I carry forever." Nathan nodded. "That seems right." "I've been carrying things for a long time," Clara said. "Since before I came here, my whole life, if I'm being honest. Moving town to town, building things up, losing them, starting again. Getting very good at not needing anything to last because nothing ever did." She looked at her hands on the reins. "I don't want to do that anymore." "Don't," he said. She looked at him. "You said after the hearing," he said. "It's after the hearing. The road. The cold air." His face turned toward hers with the patience of a man who has waited for the right moment and knows this is it. "You want to say something," she said. "I want to say everything," he said. "But I'll start with the one thing." "Say it then." "I love you," Nathan said. He said it the way he said everything plainly, without ornamentation, without the performance of it. Just the fact stated clearly the way a man states something he has known for a while and has been waiting for the right time to say out loud. "Not because you needed saving. Not because of the arrangement. Not because of anything I decided on a main street. Because you sat across from me at a kitchen table and told me the truth when most people would have managed me. Because you built a school in 12 days and filled it in 2 weeks. Because you talked to Cal and didn't make it cruel. Because you stood up in front of that room today and said the thing that mattered instead of the thing that was safe." He looked at her. Because you are the most remarkable person I have met in 6 years of meeting no one, and I would like very much for you to stay. Not under the terms of the arrangement, without the arrangement entirely, because you want to. Clara held his gaze. The road, the mountains behind them, the ranch ahead where 14 children came every morning, and where there was a room that smelled of cedar and had gradually become, over the course of 7 weeks, the closest thing to a home she had ever had. I already told you I don't want a man who saves me, she said. I know, he said. I want a man who sees me, she said. Who knows what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and respects it without needing to own it. I know, he said again. Is that what you're offering? Yes, he said. That is exactly what I'm offering. Clara looked at him for a long moment. This man who had ordered lumber before she asked, who had stood beside her in a yard full of horses and not stepped in front of her, who had looked at her across a kitchen table 6 weeks ago and told her the truth about being lonely instead of performing strength he didn't feel. Then yes, she said. That's my answer. Yes. Nathan Cole smiled. Not the small, careful, almost smile she had catalogued over the weeks. A real one. The kind that changed his whole face and made him look suddenly younger, like someone who has put down something very heavy. They rode the rest of the way home without needing to fill the silence. The wedding was 4 weeks later. Small. The ranch hands Marion Gibbs Aldrich Pratt and the families of several children from the school people who had earned the right to be present not by social standing, but by what they had done when it mattered. There was no grand celebration. Neither of them wanted one. They had both spent too much of their lives in the presence of things that looked good from the outside, and held nothing inside to feel any need to perform happiness for an audience. What they wanted was the thing itself. The circuit minister who came through on his regular rotation spoke for 10 minutes. Clara and Nathan exchanged the words. And when it was done, and they were standing in the main room of the ranch house with the people who mattered to them around them, Clara felt not the relief she had expected, not the culmination of a plan something simpler. She felt that she had arrived somewhere, not arrived at a destination, arrived at a life. The thing she had been moving toward without knowing its shape through every temporary room and every rebuilt reputation, and every morning she had made herself get up and go on. It had this shape, these people, this man. Marion Gibbs pressed her hand and said, I should have done more. On the morning. You let me in, Clara said. That was enough. Emma Hayes brought food and stayed late, and by the end of the evening had made Cal Briggs, who Nathan had invited because there were 12 years between them, that a bad decision didn't entirely erase laugh about something Clara couldn't hear from across the room. Cal caught her watching and nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough. Time moved. The territorial record stood. The formal correction was posted in the Willow Creek Town Hall in writing, where anyone could read it, where it would be read for decades, by people who had never known Clara Whitmore as anything except the woman whose name appeared there, alongside the word innocent, permanent and unchangeable, and not dependent on anyone's goodwill to remain true. Gerald Carter did not recover fully. Not in the sense of the man he had been before the unchallenged, untouched power of him. The territorial record followed him the way Ives had said it would. 2 of his 3 council seats were quietly transferred. The land office in Helena became less accommodating on matters that required his name. He was not destroyed, but he was diminished in the specific lasting way of men who have been publicly shown to be less than what they presented themselves as. Some things you don't come back from entirely, and what Gerald Carter had done was one of them. Abigail Clara heard through Marion through the ordinary channels of valley gossip that Clara had once been the subject of, and was now simply a part of, had started attending the church women's meeting again after an absence of 2 months. She sat in the back. She did not speak often. She had written a letter to Clara 6 weeks after the hearing, 2 paragraphs formal without self-pity. Clara had read it and put it in the drawer with her mother's photograph, and had not written back, but had not thrown it away either. That felt like the honest response. Douglas Carter left the valley that winter. No announcement. One day his name stopped appearing in conversations and started appearing in the past tense. Clara did not ask where he had gone. The school at the ranch grew to 22 children by the following spring. The town school board sent a formal letter in January asking if Clara would accept reinstatement at the town school as well, with retroactive pay for the months of her absence. Clara sent back a letter saying she would accept the retroactive pay, was grateful for the correction to the record, and that the question of her returning to teach in town was one she would revisit in her own time and on her own terms. She had not, as of the following spring, revisited it. The ranch school had 22 children and was adding a second room. She was busy. On an April morning 11 months after the October morning that had changed everything, Clara stood in the school and watched Thomas Reeves work through a mathematics problem that she had genuinely not been certain he was ready for when she assigned it. He was ready. He was more than ready. He got the answer with 6 minutes to spare and looked up at her with the expression of a child who has just understood for the first time that the thing they are good at might be something they get to keep. She felt Nathan before she heard him the particular quality of the air when he came to the doorway, which she had learned the way you learn the sounds of a house you've lived in long enough for it to know you back. She turned. He was leaning in this doorway with the morning still on him, the hours of work already visible in the set of his shoulders, looking at her with the look she had catalogued and named and kept, and that still after 11 months had the same effect on her that it had always had. "Good morning," he said. "You're up early," she said. "I'm always up early," he said. "You just don't usually notice because you're already in here." The children were watching with the transparent interest of children who believe they are being subtle. "I'll be out in an hour," Clara told him. "I'll be in the office," he said. "The spring contracts need looking at." "I'll look at them," she said. He smiled. The real one, the one that changed his face. "I know you will," he said. He left. Thomas Reeves said very seriously, "Mrs. Cole, are you listening?" "I'm listening," Clara said. "Show me the next one." He showed her the next one. She sat beside him and worked through it with him and thought, this is the life. Not the life I expected, not the life anyone would have planned from that morning in October. But this is the life. And the truth that had always been true, that a person's worth is not measured by what a rumor says, not defined by the years of hard going, or the temporary rooms, or the mornings of starting over, that truth had simply been waiting patient and permanent for the life to catch up to it. Clara Whitmore Cole had made it catch up, and she had done it on her own 2 feet, in her own time, with her own name intact, permanent, and entirely her own. That was the thing no one could ever take from her again. Not a rumor, not a powerful man's scheme, not the town's opinion or its silence or its carefully managed cruelty. She had built something that held, and this time she intended to keep it.